Welcome back to Moat Cottage. It's that time of year in my small homestead garden when I'm still harvesting my summer crop and wanting to prepare the same garden space for my winter crop. Some plants come to their natural end, like the tomatoes with the larger fruit. They were not the variety I purchased, and although they were delicious throughout the summer, the pests have moved in to what's left of the fruit, so it's easy to remove them. I will remove the dark cherry tomatoes and zucchini plants later in the week when I get the rest of the fruit off the plants. The chickens and ducks can go through these scraps and what's left will be composted. This sunflower has fully developed seeds, so it's ready to be picked and dried. These are the very first figs from my little 4-year-old fig tree. I bought it as a 12-inch stick, so it's very exciting to be finally getting fruit. It grows in this large pot, and it's not very big, but it's the first year I'm getting fruit, and I've already made my money back with the fruit I've got so far. Figs are delicious sliced and browned in a little butter on the cast iron fry pan, and then drizzled with maple syrup. The nights are finally cooler, so the house is cool enough for all sorts of preserving. I've got casseroles cooking in the slow cookers, and the unused tomato skins from my roux con carne recipe are being dehydrated, as well as the rest of last year's onions. I'm focusing on pressure canning meat at the moment. Ball hasn't been supplying to international suppliers since 2020, so I'm unable to buy the proper ball mason canning lids. I was stocked up, but my supply has finally come to an end, and so now I'm having to use the Shore-Tight lids, which say they're ball, but they're actually fakes, and I'm paying around $2 a lid for an inferior and unreliable product. So this week's dinners will be what doesn't seal. This batch is roux con carne, and some of the jars will be turkey pie mix. I think it's still worth canning, even though some of the lids won't seal. You can only do your best under the circumstances that you're dealt and continue making the most with what you've got. To tell if your ball mason lids are fakes, there'll be no USA flag on the box, but everything else will look the same. 2 out of 16 jar lids didn't seal in this batch. If you're not making your own flavoured salts yet, I highly recommend it. They are so delicious. I'm making onion salt, and to my NutriBullet blender I've added pink Himalayan sea salt, the dried and cooled tomato skins, as well as the dehydrated onions, and I blend it up into a powder. When you start making your own homemade salts, you'll never buy store-bought again. The passion fruits have started coming in. They're ripening and falling off the vine. I have to pick them every day so that I don't waste any. At the start of the season for passion fruits, they get eaten fresh, and towards the end of the season, I will start to preserve them. I finished harvesting the zucchinis and tomatoes in this section of the vegetable garden. I'm using the straw on my walkways to reduce evaporation in the garden and prevent me slipping over. I will add more straw on the new garden beds once the seedlings are up and I can mulch around the plants. The garden beds have been tidied up and compost has been added. And using your own homemade compost means this is free nutrition for your garden to grow. In this garden bed I'm sowing giant noble spinach seeds. I'm leaving room so that I can plant some more in another month's time. In the other garden beds I've sown silver beet seeds, snow peas and turnips. I love turnips. Homegrown turnips are amazing. I had intended to can these peaches in a honey syrup for the winter. I love a jar of summer in the winter time, but as I'm rationing my lids, I decided to dehydrate them instead. To dehydrate them, I cut the washed peaches and removed the seeds, and then I cut them into quarters. I place them on the dehydrator, spaced out so that they can have good airflow for dehydrating. If you've got bigger peaches, you may need to cut them a bit smaller so that the trays still sit properly when you're dehydrating. I'm dehydrating these at 60 degrees Celsius, that's 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The time is variable depending on many factors, but when they're dry, leathery and still pliable, that's when they'll be ready. This batch of canning is raw packed chicken, turkey pie mix and some chickpeas, and 5 jars out of 16 didn't seal this time. I love silver beet. It's one of my favourite vegetables and I happily share it with my flock. They need the greens in their diet and they love it as much as I do. As it's autumn, the birds will start to molt. They lose their feathers and get all new feathers ready for the winter, so they have a beautiful warm coat for the winter season. Because they're going to be molting, I like to give them some extra protein to help them with their regrowth of the new feathers. Boiled eggs in their shells blended up so they don't look like eggs is a good way to get extra protein into their diet. You don't want them to look like eggs because you don't want them to start eating eggs that are just being laid. Another way is to add in some sunflower seeds. The sunflower I picked the other day has dried and I can give this straight to the birds. If you have smaller birds, you might like to crush up the sunflower seeds a bit to help them with their digestion of the seeds. Other good sources of protein are fish meal, fish, mealworms, pumpkin seeds and chopped parsley. The dehydrated peaches feel like they're dry but they're still pliable and leathery, so they're ready. I'll let them cool down to room temperature and I'll test them again once they're at room temperature just to be sure that there's no moisture in them before I jar them up. Here are some other videos you might like. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.